Okay. So, a big topic for a Monday morning. Hope everyone has had a good amount of coffee. So, why are we doing this really? The human benefit of computer games is an extremely big topic, and I will claim to be no special expert in it per se, but I certainly have a lot of opinions. So a lot of what you see are basically just my opinions on the topic, and I hope they are of some use. And we will then dissect all of that on the roundtables tomorrow. So I come from CCP, where I've been for 16 years, first as CTO, and in 2004 I took over as CEO. But before that, I actually started to create worlds to the topic of the conference back in a little startup in Iceland called D.I.C.E. Interactive, which was started in '92, actually, by a 13-year-old guy in Iceland. And the mission there was to create virtual reality in '92 in Iceland. And the kind of format was VRML, which, if you've been around long enough, you maybe remember that was the 3D version of the internet that was about to spring into the world in kind of '96 timeframe. Didn't happen, probably was 50 years too early, but that's kind of where I come from. I started there straight out of university. I hadn't even finished it, to create a social virtual reality with VRML. That didn't work so great as a business foundation, so we actually took a lot of the technology, spun it out into a new company called SmartVR, and that company actually made some money by taking VRML tech and what we built, selling it to kind of B2B formats. We did language learning, heavy equipment training, dangerous environments, etc. And that later got sold to America. Didn't become anything big, but we made some money. But I left that company midstream to join CCP, which had the mad plan of making the first computer game ever made in Iceland, EVE Online. Not only the first game made in Iceland, but in many ways the first game of its sort, especially because we wanted everyone to play together. And then we've gone on to virtual reality, where we kind of jumped into the fray a little bit because of our background. A lot of the founding team of CCP came from Oz, so kind of virtual reality was something we dreamed about as kids. It was science fiction to actually have screens on your face when we were doing the VRML worlds, but now that kind of has become reality. And out of all that, then I tend to think a lot about, so what is the human benefit of all this? What's the purpose? Is this only, are computer games just to kind of reduce boredom in the world, or is there a greater purpose to it all? Yeah, just a little kind of for context when I'm going to talk about future concepts. Then when we were nerding out there in a basement in Iceland making the social VRML worlds, Iceland was connected to the internet with a modem, the country. So when you showed up early, you had to wait while the country dialed in to the internet. So, and there we were, making virtual reality. So we're kind of not allergic to trying to go for kind of big ideas with very little means. And EVE Online is very much that. So EVE Online was assembled by 30 people in Iceland in 3 years, and nobody had made a game before. It was even so bad that I don't think anyone on the team had seen a game developer from afar. So this was back in kind of 99, 2000, so travel and stuff and going to GCC was a major investment for a little startup in Iceland. So the game is kind of made in almost like a pure isolation. It's kind of just our kind of pure idea, and that's why it's in many ways a bad computer games, just because we kind of lacked all the language and understanding of games. So I often say the game might have just as well been made in space. That is, if you would have coffee in space, which I think you would have. And we often jokingly call it the best chance that Iceland has a space program. Iceland only has 320,000 inhabitants. It's actually smaller than EVE today. And I think we're nearing about 1% of the GDP. So Iceland has the only profitable space program. So fast forward 13 years, EVE Online has been this experimental kitchen of like so many things. We have experimented with development methods, economic models. Our users have experimented on us. There's been social engineering across the board. It's like this kind of petri dish of ideas and things, and it's created some amazing feats of the human condition. You've probably all read stories by now of people that set out an agenda to steal a corporation by infiltrating with secret cabals for years. There are space fights where like $300,000 worth of spaceship equipment is lost live on Twitch TV. So you probably heard all that. And we have spent quite a lot of time and done a lot of mistakes. So we kind of are constantly testing this thing of like, where are the boundaries of what makes sense to do? And we're actually now testing it even further. EVE is actually going to open up free access to the game in November, which is something we've been kind of working on for a long time. The game is not really engineered to be a free-to-play game, but we've come up with a model which I think is very fitting for EVE, which is going to allow people to play the game for free. So if you haven't had a chance, then you should check it out in November. You'll get a kind of a chance to participate in a great moment in EVE Online history. Then we've gone and jumped into virtual reality. So we were one of the studio backers of the Kickstarter. Actually, a lot of our employees also backed the Kickstarter back in 2012. So we got some DK1s. And we had a ragtag team of people in Iceland put together a prototype called EVR, which we took to our fan event, and that blew people's minds. So we kind of, okay, we have to go and do something with this. But I don't think you can make any money on this for a few years. But we jumped into the fray, and we're fortunate enough to kind of had some early success. So we have kind of added a bit of investment into the field. So I think we're now, by the end of this year, we will have invested $30 million into virtual reality games. And we're just about seeing a path to break even. Break even in VR is not a science fiction. I think we're about to hit it in a few months. So we're extremely proud of that. And VR is one of these things which, when I started doing this, building social VR modes 20 years ago, VR was pure science fiction. And now we just have it. It's here, and it works, and it's freaking awesome. Sure, there's not a lot of devices out there. There are too many cables. It costs too much. There's not enough games, and all that. But this we know how to do. The process of industrialization will now set fold. It's going to get lighter, cheaper, faster, and the game catalog is going to build up, and we just have today something that was science fiction 20 years ago is just here, and we can hold it, and we can use it. And it's actually, this is true to a lot of things in the world. We are living in these super interesting times where everything, at least I dreamed about when I joined the industry, and was science fiction you read about in books, didn't really have anything but books back in '96. Especially in Iceland. And now we just have it. So a lot of my talk is kind of going to be sort of postulating, now if we have all these things, which we were dreaming about 20 years ago, what is that then going to take us? So I'm going to go on a little bit of an interlude. It's going to go all the way to like, where can it go? And then I'm going to pull it back. But before I do that, I want to talk a little more about kind of all the cool stuff which we are getting in addition to VR. And I'm going to start by artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence, of course, is something that computer games have used for decades. We have NPCs in EVE. They look intelligent. I've actually programmed some bits of them. They're not super intelligent, but they are really good at faking it. So they're a form of intelligence, but they don't learn. They don't really persist their discoveries over time. We're actually now doing some experiments on how we can make the system of Eve learn through kind of leveraging AI and persistent learning into the system. But that's going to take a lot of experimentation. I'm a little scary what that means once Eve starts to learn on its own, but let's park that for a bit. So AI has made amazing strides. And I don't think we're using it enough and in the right ways for computer games. I think we can start to leverage AI a lot when it comes to building worlds. I recently learned of a massive tech company in the world that has hundreds of their smartest people working on AI, as everyone seems to be doing these days. And they have found a way to have their AI recognize any form of cat. So their AI can recognize a drawing of a cat, a video of a cat, a picture of a cat, and it can know a cat from a dog. And they are on a mission to make that AI have the processing ability to spot anything we can do in a second. So think of anything that the human mind can do in a second, and they're kind of operating on that layer. So if they have taught the AI to recognize a cat, then it has a pretty good understanding of what a cat is, what it's made of, its bits and pieces, how it moves, probably not how it smells, but maybe they have that. But so if the AI already knows this about a cat, it should be able to create a cat. So we go through this extraneous process of making concept art, modeling, texturing, integrating, rigging, animating, fur dynamics, God knows what, to make a cat. And cats seems to be a thing, as we all know. And so if the AI already knows this, why can't it just create a cat? Why can't I just say, hey, Unity, David, give me a cat? And not like a cat from some backlog of pre-modeled cats. No, give me a cat as you, the AI, would imagine a cat. Make it out of polygons, and then make sure it runs on modern hardware, and just figure it out, goddammit. This can be done. This is not science fiction. Already exists. It knows all forms of cat. It understands what a cat. The step of actually making cats is just like somebody has to do it. David, do it.
It's not that hard.
Yeah, exactly. It's not that hard. Yeah. So I have this fantasy of like being in VR, where you can just manifest things out of the imagination of the AI. You would say, give me a teapot. I have a teapot. Make it black. Make it pour tea. This takes way too much time and effort and human labor, which should be rather uplifted to kind of more creative and impactful tasks, because we can get AI to automate and simplify and just generate a lot of the kind of tedium that is built up in the pipelines we use to create worlds. Just imagine the empowerment you could feel and we could give to our players and consumers if they could manifest things out of the imagination of artificial intelligence. I would pay money for that. Then we have close to infinite computing in the clouds. I remember back in '99, we were assembling servers ourselves out of Pentium 3s, which is what we had to like run a single-sharded E1-line universe on some hacked version of Python. It took enormous effort. I think 70% of the effort of creating E1-line was just making it work as a single-sharded game. Now, when we're doing Valkyrie, it's just all in the clouds. Sure, there's some work. Smart people have to do super smart things. But the leverage they have from just having it, it's amazing. And I mean, it's science fiction level. Again, when we were struggling doing this 20 years ago at the social VRML company and at CCP with Eve, so much effort went into this, and now it's just gone away. And we can build on top of this amazing platform, and I don't think we have even scratched the surface of what can really be done with this. And then something I think about a lot is that kind of social order, concept of possession, money, debt, obligations, all the kind of social contracts and systems we have evolved as mankind, super primitively, using paper and primitive understanding of economic theory. In computer games, we can accelerate these concepts quite a lot. We've done a lot of experimentation in EVE in terms of economic models. EVE Online is its own unique economic model of managing item origination, money supply, et cetera. We kind of have this trickle-down economy of like managing faucets and sinks, which most MMOs does. And the more you learn about the money in real life, it's kind of like that anyway. People are kind of just sort of eyeballing how much money to put in and how much money to take out. And of course, money is a complete science fiction. Money doesn't really exist. It's just something we've been socially kind of wired to think that is a real thing. And we recently introduced, or recently, it's 2008, we introduced this concept of plagues, which I think we've been credited quite a bit on kind of inventing. It's actually inspired by a Chinese game from 2005, Fantasy Westward Journey from NetEase. They had a similar system. So I would say that concept of plagues, which is now turned into bonds in RuneScape and it's been adopted pretty much with any kind of persistent virtual world, because it's a fantastic system of arbitrating time and value and how you price your work in an MMO towards the work of other people in reality. It's a super efficient system of arbitrating between these two things. And this is an invention of games, and really when you dig into it, what's it made of, it really kind of looks like Bitcoin. Bitcoin actually has a cooler thing underneath, which is the blockchain, which is super cool. The more you dig into it, it's like, whoa, we should use this for games. This like has definition of work. This has controlled item origination. We could really kind of unify all games together through this, not with some weird item exchange, as people have tried out, but kind of we could go lower. We can go to the fundamental assumptions of work and how people value their time. I think there's a super opportunity in somebody to figure that out. Maybe it might be us, maybe it will be somebody here, how to leverage the blockchain for controlling item origination, destruction, and work on the blockchain for all games in the world, and then take over the banking system, which you know is any mission of anyone from Iceland. Okay, nobody got that joke. That's good. We're over the whole thing. And we also have an increasing understanding of like what makes us tick. When I go to these conferences, I talk to gaming CEOs, everyone has these massive, elaborate psychological theories about why people play their games like that, and then they want to experiment in this, and this retention mechanic is going into early access over here, and we're trying that. We like run probably the most kind of psychological experiment with every game we do, where we're learning about the human mind and the human condition. So all these kind of theories, I have a billion of them. I meet other people with a billion theories, and this classing of theories, we're accelerating our knowledge of what makes people tick. If you think what a computer game was 20 years ago, how it was assembled, to the science of what it is today, all the psychologists that work on it, all the marketing, all the product development that goes into, all the testing, all the radical experimentation, we are synthesizing probably the biggest brain trust of understanding how people work, how we work. So you think about like societies, governments, economists spend inordinate amount of time. They spent hundreds of years to figure this out and then make social constructs and control mechanisms to make sure that society doesn't rip apart. And we are doing this at such an accelerated pace. It's even to the point where I often associate more with the social order and the culture, et cetera, of computer gamers than I do to the nations I live in or the religion I don't have. So we have a lot to go and leverage. So it's a kind of, in summary, so we have virtual reality. Science fiction 20 years ago. I have one at my house. and we're now so over it, we're even just complaining about it. But it's freaking virtual reality. Then we understand what makes us tick. We have infinite computing in the clouds, and we understand social order, and we should do more hacking on blockchains and things like that. And then we're about to have robotic brains, which are about to be so good that people like Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking are warning us about them. And these are not kind of some crazy futurists you see on YouTube. These are freaking Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking. So generally people that know what they're talking about, they're afraid of it. So it's becoming science fact. It used to be absolute science fiction to talk about the singularity, superintelligence. If you go on YouTube and look this up today, which I did a lot while preparing for this talk, there is extraordinary amount of stuff happening in this, and we're completely underutilizing it. And then, if we dig even deeper, I learned in my endless YouTube surfing for this talk about a concept called CRISPR, which is basically a robot to runtime decode and encode our DNA. Okay, so not only do we have all this science fiction becoming science fact, we're about to cure cancer, aging, and God knows what. It's just going to be cured foreseeably in our lifetimes. We might live forever if we want to. And we're about to have commercial space being not science fiction. People are buying tickets to freaking space. Virtual reality, AI, living forever, going to space. Where will this end? So where will this end? So it helped me a lot to think about this, to go like, okay, how far can we really take it? So in my YouTube surfing, I was searching for, okay, what's the most crazy sci-fi I could find? And I'm not unfamiliar with sci-fi. We made a sci-fi game, which is obviously inspired by all the sci-fi 20 years ago, but that's just not enough. Yeah, I know what the Matrix is. Yeah, I know about some quantum hacking, whatever thing, but how far can it be taken? And I found something that is taking it pretty far. So this is a picture of a matryoshka brain. So in my search, I found this. It's a pretty damn cool concept. So it's the biggest computer we could ever build. So it's basically concentric Dyson spheres, which are basically little capsules around the sun. So not only could we theoretically, in the next 100 years or so, build a Dyson sphere and thus capture all the energy out of the sun, we could make concentric Dyson spheres, and that becomes a computing device by using the differential of the heat dispersion of each concentric layer. And people have designed a computing device out of this. So the physics, maybe not the philosophy of it, but the physics of it are known. You can go on YouTube, you can see all the calculations. David actually wanted me to run through the calculation, but I'm not going to do that. And that device has been calculated too. Basically, if we take the sort of 1,200 cc of salty porridge that we have in our head, which is our brain, took probably 10 million years to make it, you can estimate how much is needed to run the brain. So just not making AI, but just run a human brain. And that's not hard to estimate. You can just calculate the energy dynamic, the number of neurons, how much they fire, and all that. And it doesn't turn out to be like a huge amount. I mean, it's pretty cool. Our brains are amazing. But you could foreseeably make a computer, calculate what it means, and then how many brains you can simulate in a matryoshka brain. So you could basically not only simulate all of mankind that currently exists, which is about 7 billion people, you could simulate all mankind that has ever lived, which is about 12 billion people, and you can do that 1 trillion times over. So you can run human society on this 1 trillion times over. Then I was thinking, that's pretty interesting. So if you were in a matryoshka brain, what could you really do? Well, you could pretty much do anything. I mean, anything we experience kind of just goes into our head and creates electricity and out comes something. So you would have no limits. You could do whatever. You would live forever. And you could do that with all of mankind. Wait a minute. This is a description of heaven. So after we have lived our endless lives, which CRISPR is going to take care of, we could basically, before we decide to die, decode our brains and go to heaven. Huh. So as I said before, I'm not a very religious person. So there might be a heaven. I'm perfectly fine with that. But because I don't believe in it, I'm probably not going to get allowed in. And if I were to be let in, I probably wouldn't go in because I'm extremely stubborn. And I was like, oh, it's a trap. I'm not going to go in. But there I would go. So I could go to heaven. This monkey is going to heaven! So the ultimate purpose of all this is to make heaven. Anyway, back on planet Earth. This will probably take, I don't know, 200 years. Isn't that much science fiction? And based on how everything is accelerating, our children's might be able to log onto a Matryoshka brain. So how does all this kind of stuff now in a practical sense for the next decade, knowing that eventually we will get all the way there, and we better have some good computer games there. That's basically what we're going to be doing. It meets all the criteria of a computer game. So what will we then do in the next 10 years to kind of prepare for that, but also just make some money and delight customers in the next 10 years? So then I want to go into the brain and kind of understand what's going on there. And I have these various models on how to kind of think that through, how to make our brains be happy. And I'm a big fan of the Maslow hierarchy of needs. The Maslow hierarchy of needs have taught me a few years back to really relate to what it is that we do, because I see EVE Online, and like I said before, it isn't really like super good if you just rate it as a computer game. It's complicated, takes long, it lacks a little ding, 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 and the scores. So it isn't like that kind of experience. So it's a kind of a different thing. And I kind of struggled with that. Should we add more ding, ding, ding to it now that I learned more about that? No, that doesn't seem right. Maybe a little bit. Maybe it can be a little less kind of crazy hardcore. But it's still good. It's still good that it's complicated and hardcore. That's what it is. So we shouldn't change that. But what is it then? And I found through this model to kind of realize, OK, it's a self-actualization machine. So through EVE Online, players are enabled to self-actualize in a virtual world in a way that maybe they can't do in society. And that's amazing. So rather than have the system of trying to have everyone self-actualize in reality, which doesn't scale, our social constructs aren't really made for it, but we are making all these computer games, which are amazing social construct, and they're extremely different. So there, we can provide different platforms for different people to self-actualize. And that is the ultimate purpose, according to Maslow, who did this in 1943, by the way. Pretty smart guy. And this has led us to say things like, OK, our purpose in life is to create virtual worlds more meaningful than life, which was the core purpose of CCP for a very long time. It's an extremely chaotic purpose, or it's kind of provocative, and it's caused a lot of kind of trampling even inside the company. And it's not very actionable, so we've actually come up with a way to describe it, which is more, we want to create virtual worlds where people rank their experiences in them as some of the highlights of their lives, which we think is a great kind of focus for the company to think about. So how can this virtual world we are creating create experiences for our users, which are some of the highlights of their lives? And usually the highlights of your life, as you remember them, are some form of self-actualization. And I mean, we're all gamers. We don't have to think back of like, when did I really have a highlight of my life in a computer game? I've obviously had several, some of them in EVE Online. And here we have you use this kind of as a benchmark. So here's kind of the typical sort of highlights of your lives: having children, getting married. Here's an EVE monument and an EVE spaceship. And we've done the research. This is often the case you find in EVE Online players' homes. So we kind of think we're already doing this. So EVE obviously is a massive sandbox. So we thought for a while, okay, maybe we're the sandbox MMO company, that's all we do. But now we're kind of opening it up. I'm sure if you play Valkyrie and Gunjack, they're more kind of, they have slides and little rides. So we think of, okay, you're basically making digital playgrounds. So we think of the experiences of a playground, which is more approachable than making heaven. It's going to take a while. Making a playground, we must be able to do that. And to think of really what we're creating, the worlds we're making, they're digital playgrounds. And in my research for this talk, I found this. So this is the modern version of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's called the 30 elements of consumer value. It's an extremely sort of interesting model. We have not yet applied it at CCP, but it seems very fitting. I've actually tweeted a link to an HBR, our Harvard Business Review article, if you want to read more about it. It's a really good read. So it kind of organizes the value you can provide to consumers into these functional, emotional, life-changing, and social impact layers, which very much map to the Maslow hierarchy of needs. So on the bottom, we have a lot of saves time, simplifies, makes money, reduces risk, organizes, integrates, connects, reduces effort, avoids hassle, reduces cost, quality, sensory appeal, informs. Not a lot of computer games much on this layer. You want your bank to kind of exist in this layer. Your bank should make you money, avoid hassle, and those reduce anxiety. Then we have the emotional layer. There we have rewards me, nostalgia, design or aesthetics, badge value, wellness, therapeutic value, fun, entertainment, provides access. So we actually live quite a bit in here. Definitely entertainment is a part of it and needs to be there. But you can see there's so much more we could do than just provide fun. And then we have provides hope, self-actualization, motivation, heirloom, affiliation, belonging, and at the top we have self-transcendence. So we are one of the few things that can really exist on this layer. You see something like a Facebook, this is the connect value. So that exists in a functional domain, whereas I think what we can do all the way up here. So I would encourage you to check this out. I'm going to certainly dig deeper into it and see if we can apply it more to kind of talk about these things at CCP. We're actually a lot at CCP now. We've gone through a really difficult period of kind of restructuring our first kind of wave after EVE Online. I can tell you the second album is a hard thing to put together. So we have, now that we're out of these woods, we've been working a lot on goal setting and targeting and things like that. So we're about to now, at CCP, to go on a big kind of exploration effort. We already have a lot of small teams doing kind of little experiments, not using all the things I talked about earlier, but we're kind of nibbling on them. What can we do with these things? Some of them have gone out and we've showed to the world like a Valkyrie and a Gunjack and Project Arena, but we also have a lot of stuff we're kind of just tinkering with in the basement and it's too early to show. And we use this model of we think about sending people through the desert and see if we find water, but if they're not going to find water, we pull them back. We are kind of generally investing into things that fall into kind of these themes of nurturing the core, which is doing things like opening free access for EVE Online, doing kind of true innovation with EVE Online so it goes and prospers for another decade and decade after that. And we're also experimenting a little bit with other PC concepts. Then, of course, we have taken a massive stance on VR, and we'll continue to do that, and are experimenting there. And then what we've learned from our 20 years of existing, we're actually turned 20 years old next year, is to keep the company strong. So we've worked a lot towards building a cash position. We now have $50 million in the bank. We're just not using, keeping the company profitable. I actually want to build it to $100 million. Not everyone agrees with me on that. It's like, Hilmar, why would you need $100 million? Well, I don't need them, and that's the point. I just want to have it there. Look away. Board of directors, that's your problem. See, we're still making money. Because we learned that when you have that environment, and that also goes a little bit into a Maslow hierarchy of needs, if people feel safe, they are more likely to do something super inspired. So we're kind of building the company towards that. And we're kind of foreseeing for the next 5 years, we're going to run these kind of things. We're going to have some little hits, which we pull out. Maybe they become big. And we know in this kind of 5-year period, I think it's going to be where we will have VR adopted to mass market levels, AI to the point where we can manifest a cat. And we'll figure out what to do with this blockchain Bitcoin thing. And post those 5 years, we will be different people. Because we're already becoming different people. It's happening actually quite quickly. It's one of the research I did while prepping for this talk was a super interesting TED lecture that was talking about like how much of human work has become super abstract. A farmer used to be manual labor, working a farm. I've gone to a cow farm in Iceland where the cows are milked by robots, they're managed by AI, and the farmer has an app on his phone to run his farm, which is basically he's paying farm bill with actual cows. So any job seems to be turning into a computer game. If you think of this notion of gamification, where does that come from? Well, reality is so boring, we have to steal psychological theory from the gaming industry to make reality more interesting. So already we are kind of evolving mankind at a certain clip. 100 years ago, being an investment banker was just like having a pile of money and giving it to somebody. Now it's like super abstract reasoning in purely theoretical domains. They're playing a computer game. So post these 5 years, I think we'll be different people, which will allow us to go even further than we can even think of today. It's one thing I learned. Okay, the Matryoshka brain, 200 years. Okay, next 5 years, I can probably predict that. But after 5 years, I will be a different person. So why even go and try to think what happens beyond 5 years? We'll figure that out, and we'll go even higher. And I think that in the next 10 years, we can basically render any human fantasy real. I've seen enough in our VR experiments where I've been a wizard. I've danced with myself in a super awkward, weird scenario involving a female Eve character. And I felt things which are like, Jesus Christ, we're onto something huge here. So I think in the next 10 years, we will do something amazing we can't even think of today, even though I think we should dissect it a bit in the roundtables tomorrow. And I think we might come up with a plan to solve a pretty big problem, which is, so if everyone on this earth, all 7 billion people, were to live like us here, we would need 5 planets. So we better go and find 5 planets, which I think we should do. It's a good hedging strategy, but let's not put all the money on red. Let's put some people out in space. Elon, go fix stuff. Worry about overpopulation on Mars. And to fix that problem. Because, like I said, if this lifestyle which we live, and we are the problem, not the other 6 billion people that don't live our lifestyle, we are ruining the planet. And if we promote that lifestyle and we want to get everyone to that, we will just ruin it. I'm pretty sure when you have the super intelligent AI, it's going to figure that out really quickly. It's like, OK, these monkeys over here are not playing nice with the rest of the monkeys over here and all the rest of the biomass. So let's just take 6 billion people, park them somewhere in the ground, and we're all good. So this is what Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking were worried about, because it's I don't know, it's a reasonable solution. It's not a very good one. It's not one I support at all. So I support that we just find a much better way to live our lifestyle so that we use all these concepts and all these worlds and all these experiences for a much more sustainable life. Of course, we always have the fixed cost of what is a computer and a cloud, etc. But that is a fixed cost, and it's much lower than the footprint we live today. So I want to put out the challenge. If we cannot have a virtual D.I.C.E 10 years from now, we will have failed. And we should use that as the benchmark. If we would bother to go to a virtual D.I.C.E. 10 years from now and have the same kind of experiences as we have here, then we have succeeded. Just imagine the cost to the planet of holding this conference. If we're taking all these resources of the Earth to have this conference, then let's make something of it. I am pretty sure that if we kind of put our minds together and we continue this trend, we will be able to have sustainable life, social justice for 7 billion people on this Earth. Thank you.